Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and specifically welcome back to my Masterclass series where I go above and beyond my regular tank reviews so that you can take your gameplay in vehicles to the next level. Today we're going to be looking at one of 3 tier 10 American tech tree heavy tanks. This is the M5Y. When it went into the game, it provided a brand new mechanic of having a reserve track so that even if you lost the front part of your tracks, you could still keep mobile and pull yourself back into safety. But to say that this vehicle is popular inside World of Tanks would definitely be an overstatement. Anyway, by the end of today's video, you should know everything there is to know about the M5Y, and also why I think this vehicle is a little underrated inside the game. So firstly, how is the M5Y compared to all of the other tier 10 heavy tanks in the game? Well, it has the 5th worst win ratio, although when we also take into account player skill, we notice it jumps up a few slots, but still is significantly below the T110E5. The first thing to talk about with the M5Y is that it has 2 guns available, a 105mm and a 120. However, when you compare these 2 guns, you lose damage per minute, you lose standard pen, you lose premium pen to gain 80 alpha damage. You also have much worse shell velocity, much worse aim time, much worse accuracy, and your turret traverse dispersion is 40% worse. So all in all, I think you would be mad to want to use the 120mm on this tank, which is really convenient considering that the stock gun is by far the best gun on this vehicle. So what is really special about the M5Y? Well, it doesn't have the damage per minute of the T110E5. It doesn't have the alpha damage or the gold pen of the T110E5. It also has worse dispersion when it's moving, but the real highlight of this tank has to be 10 degrees of gun depression. The fact that it is pretty fast for a heavy at 40 forwards and 15 backwards. And the fact that the turret is linked to the gun. So on some vehicles where the gun moves independently to the turret, when you use your gun depression, your tank gets really good because your weak points are no longer visible. With the M5Y, however, your weak point is always going to be visible. However, this also means that when you need to elevate the gun and deal with opponents that are above you, for example, your opponents are never going to have the advantage of being able to shoot towards the top of your vehicle. One of the most important things that you can do in this tank is to raise your gun slightly when your opponents are aiming at you. If they have heat, be careful because then they're going to be able to shoot underneath your gun, but I still feel like this is a much better thing to do than to allow them to have easy shots into the weak point of this vehicle. So get into the habit of raising your gun about this much compared to your opponents between your shots, and you should be able to do good things with regards to hiding your weak point. Crew-wise on this vehicle, it's very important that you use a 0 skill commander because they have high pressure as they're also performing the radio operator abilities on this tank. Apart from that, a high skill crew really isn't necessary on this vehicle. I'd recommend that you get Deadeye on your gunner because you're going to be shooting your opponents a lot with only 320 alpha damage. Sorry, let me correct myself, 360 alpha damage at tier 10. So with this rapid fire gun, the Deadeye really does scale well. I'd also recommend taking things like Snapshot on your gunner. On your driver, I'd recommend Smooth Ride to be able to improve the gun handling of this vehicle, because I don't really feel like this tank needs vert stabs, so it could use every little help in improving the gun handling outside of this. I'd also recommend on your loader, with the very fast reload that this tank has, that you have Intuition, so you can switch between the great APCR rounds and the heat rounds when you need a little bit of extra pen. Equipment wise on this tank, when I 3-marked it, I used 2 builds. One is durability, vents, and a gun rammer. This gives you all the durability you need and the maximum firepower as well. For my second build, I dropped the durability for a turbo so I could be able to take this tank's speed up to 45 kilometers an hour, as well as also having a power to weight ratio of over 20. So you can use that to race yourself into some positions, such as the hill on Tundra, and possibly even try and contest the hill on Mines to gain an advantage against your opponents. But considering this vehicle's top speed of 40 and great power to weight ratio is good enough, most of the time I'm using the durability. Field mods wise, I'd recommend all-terrain suspension on this vehicle to be able to enhance the mobility, but if you feel your tracks are getting taken off a little bit too quickly, then you might want to go for the lightweight suspension instead. Although, considering that this vehicle, it's not even really bad news when your suspension does get taken off because you have the reserve track mechanic, then I would personally recommend improving the mobility of this vehicle. Next up, you want to improve the accuracy, then you want to take the view range on this vehicle. For your bonus slot, I'd personally recommend the mobility, so you can either slap your turbo in there or your vents on your durability build. For the penultimate field mod, I'd recommend the reverse speed. The turret traverse doesn't really matter too much on this tank. And for the final field mod, if you find a lot of artillery in your games, you might not want to take this field mod, But I personally, as I don't use vertical stabilizers on this tank, want to improve the on movement and hull traverse dispersion on this tank so I can just keep firing with this tank's rapid fire. So firstly, we're rolling out on Fisherman's Bay, and I've elected to use the turbo build on this tank because I like to play this map aggressively. My goal on Fisherman's Bay is to take the fight to the enemy team because frankly, camping in this scenario is just so darn dull. So I want to get straight across. I want to try and go and flank my opponents, and when you can drive around at 45 kilometers an hour, that's kind of like the speed of a Patton without a turbo. And when you've got a half decent hull armor and half decent turret armor, once you've managed to get that, you can feel pretty strong. A little bit concerned about the WZ-111 5A and the Carnarvon, or so I say the Cranvarn, that is chilling behind me there. So I know that I am taking a risk by making this play. But I do feel like this vehicle, with its darn decent mobility, kind of gets away with taking risks. At least that's what I feel with the tank. And when you get going with the rate of fire here, don't be too afraid to side scrape in this tank. After all, it does have a half decent hull, but just don't expect that the hull is always going to look after you. One of the best and the worst things about this tank has to be this tiny frame. The fact that all of this area that you see, if I zoom out a little bit here, is just tracks. It's not actually the hull. The hull is actually very narrow on this vehicle. So when you do side scrape, you can definitely get away with it. So here we can see the reserve track mechanic. Even though my front track is off, we are actually still moving. You can actually see the track just there in front of the vehicle. It's a very bizarre thing. Now, when you sit still with this vehicle, you will repair your track quicker. So sometimes you're just going to have to get a feel for it and judge the situation. It's actually best to sit still to then be able to get your main track on. Because when you're driving around without it, I believe you're pretty much going about half the speed that you otherwise would do. So while it can be nice if you don't have the repair kit, or if you want to just save the repair kit to be able to then pull back around the corner, or to be able to keep pushing forwards to chase that opponent that's trying to get away from you, it is still necessary for you to sit still to repair the track. It will actually allow you to go from A to B faster than if you were to just drive on the broken track, which will only mean that your crew take longer to be able to get your vehicle back to its optimum capacity. Oh, this is what you want to see. T110E5 losing its track there as it's coming around the corner. I have to admit, when you've got such a rapid fire like a gun like this and the decent gun handling and accuracy that you have with the 105mm, it is the kind of tank that really does reward anyone who is able to aim. Look at these tracking shots right now on the E5, now on the Leopard as well, finishing him off, and that is one dead medium tank with a nice 900 assistance of the tracking for our opponents behind us. And that's, I guess, where the Cranvarn does come in handy, right, with the 111. Alright, so one thing I'd also like to highlight that I didn't inside the garage, I usually only talk about equipment, but I should also talk about consumables when it comes to this tank. And that is because this vehicle has such a compact tank that all of your crew feel like they're hugging inside the vehicle. And so I would thoroughly recommend that all of you out there consider taking a premium repair kit, not repair kit, premium med kit on this tank. Because otherwise, I just feel like I lose crew members so often. Remember that the premium med kit, it doesn't only heal all of your crew members at the same time, it also reduces the chance that your crew are going to be injured in the first place. And so while it can be expensive, this is definitely one of the vehicles that I would like to prioritize a premium med kit on, rather than going for a small one. But again, it can be expensive for all of you players out there. Alright, so that 30B took a shot at me. I guess it was a bit of a misplay there for me to be able to go after the E5. But oh man, these 30Bs, they're just farming me right now. Are they in a platoon? Well, they're not really doing a good job of looking after each other, but they're definitely doing a good job of feeding me. With a heat round going through the front of the vehicle, that is our top gun, and I would say in the first whatever of this battle. But this is actually, this is a janky install. I really wanted to feature this game. But to be able to get it to work, I had to download an old version of World of Tanks and then combine the Russian version client, because that's the only one I could find of this version of World of Tanks. And then I jankily decided to move over the English text into the Russian version of the game. It kind of still works, but unfortunately it's not doing the clock very well. Apparently clocks tick different in Russia. But one thing's for certain, this tank hits the same on both of those servers. We are absolutely cruising through our opponents. We're up to Gosh, 7,500 combined in this battle so far, and we've still got some action left to go. The intuition switch to the HE, hopefully for the batch at 155.58, or maybe just into the Conqueror gun carriage. The shell misses. I think I should have intuition switched back there to the APCR rounds, and that means that we're not going to get our Radley Walters medal. We were at 7 kills there, and we missed the Radley. Oh well, are we still going to be able to get one? Possibly, we'll have to find out. The STRV-103B caught out in the open. Hopefully a nice shot towards the side. And this thing, you can just... The gun handling is really nice on this vehicle. If only this tank just had better hull armor like the T110E5, then it would basically be a better T110E5. But it doesn't. The hull armor on this vehicle is way worse than the T110E5. You can't over-angle it like you can on a T110E5 with its boat-shaped hull, where you bait your opponents into shooting your side armor on that tank. Oh, hopefully we can get the Radley. Come on. Oh, no. No Radley again with the Gorilla finishing him off. There's only 2 tanks left. I'm not sure if I'm even going to be able to make it there. I'm aiming for the artillery, who I know shot me up from the corner. There he is. Will it be a Radley? Will it be? Yeah, there we go. Nice. 8 kills, and you can see I'm already looking to pose for the screenshot like a good little scrubby baby, right? So not a bad start here for the masterclass of the M5Y. So it's a solid game for a solid damage dealing tank. So Radley for those 8 kills, high caliber for the 6,000 damage dealt, 4,151 assistance on top of that, didn't fire much gold, so made a very decent profit, and got our second mark of excellence. Next up, we're going to be rolling out on Tundra, and as I said with my equipment recommendations, I'm once again going to be going for the turbo, because I'm going to be plowing forwards, trying to take the hill and taking the fight to the enemy team. With the turbo on this vehicle, it's one of the faster tier 10 heavies in the game. It's not as fast as, say, an IS-7, but it's a different kind of tank to an IS-7 or a 260, right? Those vehicles, they don't have any gun depression. When you think about it, there aren't any heavy tanks that have really good speed and really good gun depression at tier 10. It's kind of more of the mediums that have those roles. Wargaming have been quite careful to not create super fast, heavy tanks that have incredible gun depression, unless, of course, you get the Chieftain, right? But that's not inside the tech tree, so it's not even really fair to have that kind of comparison inside here. So, while we haven't quite managed to contest the hill, we've made it there to be able to deny the enemy team the hill. If we weren't early into this position, maybe the enemy team would have been more confident to be able to push through, but that's just not the case. So in this situation, I want to show you how great this tank is once you only expose the turret. Lots of taller heavy tanks here might be exposing their lower plate against the 430, but this one just isn't. And from here, we can just use the reserve track once again to pull back round the corner, or even push round to be able to get a shot. No need to waste the repair kit. Now, I would always recommend to take a repair kit on this tank. Even if you just get ammo racked, that would be devastating for the rest of the battle. But at least it's nice to get to save the repair kit more often, with other tanks having to waste it. And when you've got this rapid fire gun as well, when your tracks just keep going, it doesn't feel as if it's the end of the world with the reserve track protecting you. Although we did actually see that the concept just a couple of shells ago managed to hit the back of the vehicle, which was actually able to take the reserve track off as well. So when you are shooting the M5Y, if you manage to shoot the rear wheel, you actually take both the reserve track and the main track off, which will completely incapacitate the vehicle as if it only had one set of tracks. So decent damage so far in the first couple of minutes of this game, and oh baby, I love penetrating HE shells. I believe that was an HE shell against the FV4005. I'm gonna go for an APCR shell here, and oh, that shell velocity definitely feels more like a medium tank within that regard. And I do feel like this tank with the turbo definitely blurs the line between medium and heavy. And I did find that I was having my bigger games on this tank when I elected to take a turbo on this vehicle. Some of you out there who aren't really into your vents, you might want to even take kind of like durability with a turbo and a gun rammer on this tank. Although I think that you only take the durability on maps where you absolutely don't need the mobility and you know it's going to be turning into like a brawly kind of grind fight. Because this tank isn't so much about getting tracked, right? That's the whole benefit of the reserve tracks, is you don't have to be too concerned about exposing your hull and getting locked down in one place, because the reserve track will allow you to keep moving. Which is one of the reasons why I think that this tank does do very well with a turbo on it. And so, try it out. Make sure you use a gun rammer. This is definitely a gun rammer tank. I'd say the turbo, the vents, and then the durability, whichever 3 of those 4 that you really feel. Personally, for me, I do like the vents on this vehicle to be able to improve the rate of fire a little bit more, and also to give you the better intuition switching, and as well as that 3% accuracy buff that you're going to be able to get the tank, which is like using half of one of the aiming devices as well. And look how great this tank is. Forwards, backwards, with the turbo, you're just so fast. You can control the engagement, and it looks like this 257 has really just kind of given up in this scenario. But I'm not going to let him. I'm going to keep harassing him. I'm going to keep finding him. And apart from that poor shot there, there's no escape from the M5Y. This is a fast, heavy tank that only the mediums or light tanks are really going to be able to escape. And this one can really dictate the pace of the engagement against all of the heavies. So having finished off the 257, now we're going to go to town on the back of the VZ55. And this is where this 10 degrees of gun depression on this tank just feels oh so comfortable. Are we really going to get a shot between those rocks? I've never seen that one before. Is this VZ55 really going to come round for more? I was already thinking about going off and flanking the mouse. And oh dear, bit of a misplay there by me. I aim at the side and it looks like it just was too well angled. I should have probably gone for the APCR round down on the upper hull there, or elected to fire heat on the upper hull as well. But wow, in the first 4 minutes and 40 seconds of this game, we're up to 7,000 damage. Unfortunately, the E50M takes a big old hit from the RT, and oh dear, Badger in front of me. And this is where this tank is a little lame, I'm not gonna lie. We don't have that much penetration on our gun, so we can't shoot the weak points on the Badger, aka those 2 flat plates on the front. Unlike another vehicle of the American variety, or both American varieties, the T110E5 and the T57 Heavy, both of those vehicles are going to be able to just contest that a lot more because they have 25 millimeters more heat pen. Nevertheless, are we going to get 8,000 damage? We are indeed, with the 1,000 assistance as well. This is some good marks progress. Oh baby, nearly 8,700 damage. Do we get even more against this mouse? Oh, what? They capped? You're kidding me. Oh, what a rage moment. Otherwise, we could have gone to 10k combined in this 5-minute round. So another high caliber here for our 8,696 damage in our 5.5-minute game. We fired a bit more gold this game, and because of that low alpha, yeah, you will start to spend a lot of credits if you are spamming gold with this rapid fire gun with only 360 alpha, but we still make a nice profit. All right, so now we're rolling out on Red Shire Assault. Again, I'm electing to use the turbo because I think it's so important to be able to get forwards and to be able to control the tempo of the game. With a vehicle like this that ends up hull down, apart from gaining your 10% hit points, you're not really gaining too much from the durability on this vehicle, at least for the maps that I'm showing you today. All right, so I've made a bit of a misplay here, and I got a little bit greedy. I've flown a little bit too close to our opponents, so I was very worried this 50B was going to trash me here. And oh dear, the 50B trashes me once, the T49 gets me once. Luckily, the 50B doesn't manage to connect extra shells, and fortunately for us, we show some steady aim to be able to get through the 50B's turret, even with the crunch against us. Now what I'm going to show you is that this vehicle is just something else with regards to its hold down capacity. This gun just feels so lovely. It really does feel like a sniping tank, and you'll see that I'm raising my gun now in between my shots to be able to make it so it's harder for them to get my weak point. This is about the angle that you have to achieve on this vehicle. Remember, as I showed you, that if you raise your gun too much, then you're actually going to make your kind of like your lower jaw or your chin on this vehicle a little bit weak. So raise that gun, hold the right mouse button if you want to, if you feel like it's too laborious to keep pointing it up, and then just keep plowing your opponents, and hopefully you're going to hide your weak point. And if you do this, the vehicle is voracious on a ridgeline, it really is. Talk about voracious, that T49 wanted to go in there. I wonder how long he's going to last. Well, at least he's a good distraction right now. In retrospect, I don't think I should have shot the Char there. I should have shot the Patton, because that tank can escape, whereas the Char can't. I got the Char locked in. So you should always focus the vehicle that could remain hidden if you have an opportunity to hit them. And this thing just slaps. It really does. With that like 2,600, 2,700 base damage per minute, if you do elect to use a gun rammer and vents on this thing, it does pump up the volume very quickly indeed. So I'm just wondering where this Char is, and I'm realizing, oh, he's behind a dead Centurion 7-1 there. Unfortunately, I miss. Luckily, we bounced the charge shell afterwards, still trying to feather him, trying to find out where he is. There we go. Raise the gun in between the shots to be able to hide the weak point, which a lot of people will engage. But of course, unfortunately, unlike a vehicle such as the Super Conqueror or the T125, whenever you point your gun at your opponents, your weak point on top is exposed. And so you should really try to limit the amount of time that you're pointing your gun at your opponents. That sounds a little bit counterintuitive, right? You think, well, you want to keep your gun on the target the whole time. But sure, but kind of a bit like in a mouse, where you turn your turret to the side after you shoot because you realize your cheeks are going to be vulnerable. You don't want to keep your gun pointing at your opponent any longer than you have to with this vehicle, because you want to raise it to be able to hide that weak point and improve your chance of ricochet. So, decent, aggressive round here, defending against an assault already. Apart from that mistake by being a little bit greedy against the Super Conqueror and the T49 at the beginning, after that, all we did was take 275 damage and absolutely plow through that flank. So we're going to lock the CC Mark II down. We notice there's a 263 at the back, but I want to try and keep harassing this guy. Our team is going to give us some good assistance there with the tracking. We end up getting over 1,000 tracking against the CC Mark II. Now we're going to continue to be aggressive along this ridge line, and I was just thinking farm alarm right now. And this vehicle farms very well on a ridge. Has all of that firepower that you'll be accustomed to on a tier 10 heavy. Nothing like a Super Conqueror or a T125 with regards to their damage per minute, but still absolutely no slouch. And when you've got the view range from having situational awareness, recon, premium consumable, the field mod that increases your view range, and in my case the vents as well, you're packing like 470, 480 meters view range, which means that you're catching the glimpse at the 263, even though they're at a great distance. So, just over 4 minutes into this game, and we are at nearly 9,000 combined in this round. And with a good amount of meat left on the E100, I was thinking, oh, this is some good farm, this is some good marks progress in this game. We're going to intuition switch here to see if we can get a shot through the side of the turret, and we're just about to. The aim time on this vehicle, definitely not bad for a heavy tank, but it's still, at least in retrospect there, felt quite long against the E100. But I guess that's a combination of bombing it around with the turbo and having that extra speed. So now hopefully we're gonna AP switch so we don't have to waste any more credits, and even when we're packing 9,600 combined, free to play baby is switching that heat round out for that APCR to save that little bit of extra. And why not, right? That's why you've got intuition in the first place. It's not just to switch out to load gold against the heavily armored targets, it's to switch back and save yourself some of those important credits so you can invest them instead into something like a premium med kit, because your crew are so compact in this vehicle. So this time we didn't get a high caliber. That was because we hit one of our allies. Remember, you don't get a high caliber even with 7,000 damage dealt if you hit an ally. This was 10,400 combined. We did get a Confederate medal in addition to the 2 kills, and a steel wall medal this time, showing you how strong that turret is when you are raising it in between your shots. And because we didn't fire that many gold rounds, even while resupplying consumables at full price, this was a 32,000 credit profit. Well, I guess 4th time's the charm. I just had so many good games with the M5Y that I've been saving them all up for when I was going to have my final opinion on this tank. So, let me come to a conclusion with the M5Y. The main thing that lets this tank down is the hull armor and the lack of the gold pen. This hull armor, when it is exposed, it's pretty much as bad as a Super Conqueror within that regard, and you'll want to be playing the T125 instead. With the T125, because the side of the tank is kind of like this boat shape, you can over-angle it, and then your opponents are going to ricochet off the curvature of the side of the vehicle. That just doesn't happen with the M5Y. And also, having this very condensed tank, it can be useful, but also it means the side of the tank is horrendous and easy to hit for so many of your opponents. So today what you're seeing is great games where our opponents are in front of us and we're just farming them. It's not a case of we're getting shot in the side. Say we spawned in on a Prokhorovka, for example, and we're getting absolutely obliterated in the side of the turret. Trust me, that can happen so much. And if any of you are in the process of getting marks in the vehicle, then I would thoroughly recommend that you're constantly thinking about trying to find a position where hopefully you're not getting exposed in the side of the turret, a bit like a Super Conqueror within that regard. But when your turret is this long, like it is on the M5Y, trust me, this thing just absolutely sticks out. My other big recommendation, as I showed you in the previous replay, is to make sure that you are raising your gun in between your shells if you know that you're just exposing yourself. So if you can master this kind of aggressive playstyle in this vehicle where you are hopefully first to a ridgeline, or you're there as early as maybe like an STB1, and then you just use the fact that you should have a better turret than they do, with the fact that you also have a very accurate pokey gun, hopefully you can show some marksmanship, then this thing is a very scary vehicle to contend with. And also, you know, when you've got this great power to weight ratio, as I said, I'm packing over 20 horsepower per ton with at least half okay terrain resistances, you can make some very sneaky plays. We slipped our way up, didn't get hit by a TD at the back. Sure, is a little bit of a risk, but unless it was an FV215B 183 that didn't low roll, we should have been able to make it up there. And we can see this E50 is already like, uh-oh, M5Y slinking all their way up on top of the hill. I missed my first shot. Well, I don't miss it, but I bounce it. A little bit disappointing. And right now, when you're on top of the hill, you want to farm. And this is perfect right now. The hull is pretty hidden. I'm only exposing my turret. And it's sitting up independently from the hull in this scenario. And boy, this is exactly where you want to have your opponents. Not just with the M5Y, but with all tanks with 10 degrees of gun depression. And in these kind of scenarios, it doesn't feel like it's actually worse than the T125. I would argue it's actually slightly better, having that 2 degrees of gun depression. And while I don't have the alpha, I don't have quite have the damage per minute that vehicle is packing, it is very solid indeed. And you can just, in the first 3 minutes and 15 seconds of this battle, we're up to 5,800 combined. This was one of the easiest 3 marks for me at tier 10. I feel like it's the kind of tank that when it catches momentum, boy, does it go for it. And I think this vehicle will actually do very well in the hands of an aggressive player as well. So I'm going to make a mistake here. I'm actually going to bump this concept, which was really not a nice move. And you'll see that I say sorry in capitals. I think I'm going to apologize to him again. At least I hope I am. I say sorry again, sorry concept. So that was a big mistake that I made coming down that slope. I really didn't think that he was going to stop with the BZ-176 in front of him, but he did. Luckily, he's obviously a little bit irritated still with the ... but I would be too if I got bumped from behind and it cost me a shot. And it also probably cost me a few hit points. But luckily, they've still got some left. Hopefully it's not going to cost them from being able to still have a good game. So yeah, who would have thought? 2 tanks coming down the slope at 40 kilometers an hour. I guess I failed my brake check there. I failed my driving test, unfortunately. All right, come on, baby. Let's get these shots in against the FV215B 183. This tank just prints it. It really does. Just big DPM, half okay armor. Take your chances. Sometimes the armor works. Sometimes the armor doesn't. The worst thing that you could do in this vehicle is to play passively, I feel. I think it's definitely for the cheeky players out there. It's not for the players who want to sit and want to camp and just chill on a ridgeline. I feel like it's for players who want to actively try to kind of farm their opponents within this regard. Although I still got to be careful, right? There's still 9,000 hit points left on the enemy team. They're all over towards my west. I'm just trying to light them up, but also try to close the distance without getting found here. And oh dear, can't quite manage to go through the FV215B. Right, we're going to slinky our way down the slope here. Hopefully not fatal with this very awkward hull shape. The T124 ricochets a gold round off my lower plate. The IS-3A, however, does manage to go through. And this is where I guess we've been saving our hit points for hopefully this stage of the battle. But I'm not seeing these numbers increasing very much right now. Just not really getting this kind of clean scenario. In retrospect, I probably should have gone up above me where this concept has quite rightly gone. And I think if I went above these players, I would be farming a lot harder at this stage of the game. Either that or alternatively, I could have made my way around here and then tried to get above them, maybe get behind them. That would have been risky though with getting hit in the side. And while I was thinking this was going to be a gigantic farm game, it's actually ending up not being all that good. But it's not bad, don't get me wrong. I'm not that good of a player that I can complain about doing 10,000 combined in a 6-minute round. But considering that we were pretty high before that, I thought this was going to be something truly special. But 10,700 combined in just over 6 minutes, it's still a banger of a game. So another ace tanker here for our 1471 base, a Confederate medal for damaging 6 opponents that were subsequently killed by our allies, and a high caliber for that 7,000 damage dealt. And while I did bump that concept, they were still able to get a nice meaty game as well with 8,600 combined, so it doesn't look like it was the end of the world. And while I'm not pretending that I'm getting results like the 4 games that you saw here in every single game, statistically, I still feel like I do half okay with this tank. It's a strong vehicle that can get strong results if you're willing to accept the weaknesses of having that awful side profile. Make sure you keep your opponents in front of you, having a weak point that's always exposed when you are pointing your gun at your opponents, and that this vehicle almost demands that you use a premium med kit, lest you want to be sacrificing your crew for most of the battle. Oh, and also the fact that it has rather poor gold pen compared to its 2 competition. So all in all, it's no surprise to me that the M5Y is actually not performing as well as the T110E5. It just doesn't have that magical side armor. It doesn't have that heat pen. It doesn't have the alpha damage, and it doesn't quite have the damage per minute. However, this vehicle on a ridgeline is way better than the T110E5, and the fact that it's faster means that if you're an aggressive player who likes to put the pressure on your opponents, not just by kind of out-trading them with raw firepower, but also using your mobility to get superior positions, this vehicle could be a hidden gem for you. And furthermore, considering it's in the bottom half of the list with regards to vehicles that the better players are playing, this is probably one of the better tier 10 heavies for either padding your WN8 or picking up a 3 mark with less competition. So, all in all, the M5Y, is this the best tier 10 heavy tank for going hold down against your opponents? No, it's really not even close. The Super Conqueror absolutely destroys it with regards to hold down and its overall impact inside the game. On the other hand, does the vehicle deserve to be 5th from bottom with regards to its win ratio? I really don't think so. And its poor performance I personally attribute to that this tank is just misunderstood. And if people were to let go and play it more like a medium tank, I think they'll start to do a lot better in this vehicle. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was my masterclass on the M5Y. Really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments down below what you think about the M5Y. Do you think it's an awful tier 10 heavy tank, or have you had some success in the vehicle? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.